So welcome to the 7th presentation in our How to Live Forever series. My name is Corey Schneider, and I am very excited to be with you. And let me take my video, because for some reason I'm off. As Archives Chair for Women's League, my goal is not only to tell Women's League's story, but also to help you and your sisterhood tell yours. Before we begin, I want to let you know we will be recording this session, so if you don't want to be seen, please turn off your video. Everyone will be muted to avoid unwanted background noise. We are also disabling, and why am I not on video?
I don't know.
Okay, there we go. We are also disabling the chat because it tends to be disrupting. It doesn't help. Got it. Okay. We will turn the chat back on at the end of the presentation so you can put your questions in the chat box. And of course, you can contact me anytime. While the presentation is going on, please feel free to write down your questions as you think of them during the presentation. A special welcome from Debbie Goldich, Women's League International President. Debbie, did you want to say anything or?
Sure. I never refuse the opportunity to say hello and welcome everybody. And we are appreciative of Corey and all of her efforts to archive all of Women's League's important events. Many of you were on at the beginning and you heard about the timeline that's on our website. If you haven't seen the website, go to the website. At the top, there's a pink button. It says Archives, and you can click on that. We have some really important and informative tidbits there, some real great information about the history of Women's League. And I do want to thank Corey for all of her great effort in this. And as she said, it's the 7th session that we've done on archiving. It just goes to show you how important we think our history is. And for those of you who don't know, I don't know if Corey's planning to address this, but we have given our archives from the last 103 years, to the library at JTS on a perpetual loan. And they are going to be digitalizing and archiving our archives and holding them for us so that anyone in the movement or anyone in Judaism has questions about Women's League, they can go to those archives and find out our information. And that could not have happened without Corey and her team of volunteers who came into the Women's League office, regularly for months on end, and organized and boxed and sent it over. So we thank Corey for everything. And I'm excited to be a part of the history of Women's League. And I know that all of you are also. So take it away, Corey.
Okay, thank you. Also part of the archives team, because we're under the education banner, are Ellen Bresnick and Julia Loeb, the co-chairs of education. And Ellen is not on, I don't think, but Julia is. And Julia, it's nice to have you here. I want to give many, many thanks to Sheila Kaufman for her help with the tech support, and to Janet Kirshner, who will be handling the questions at the end of the presentation. When I became Archives Chair for Women's League over 2 years ago, the pandemic blocked almost all my efforts to work with the Women's League archives. As things opened up, and we can start with the first slide, please. As things opened up, including the Women's League office, and I'm going to move mine. There we go. So as things opened up, including the Women's League office, I was able to at least visit the actual archives. Through contacts with long-standing members and staff, it became apparent that the archives were hardly being accessed or used. Very upsetting. This led me to research how to properly process our archives and thus make them more accessible and usable to our leadership, our members, and researchers. It has been an incredible journey, one that has resulted in my organizing, cataloging, and processing the Women's League archives, as well as packing them up and moving them with the help of many, many volunteers. Next slide, please. Tonight, thank you. I want to share with you this journey along with research I have done. Please be aware that there is an incredible amount of material available. Creating an archive can go from the very simple, pretty much what I did, to the professional, just like the archivist. There is an enormous amount of material available to help you, no matter how simply or professionally you do it. You can always get more detailed along the way. And as Nike says, just do it. Creating an archive is really a never-ending process. It is like a treasure hunt that you are creating a map for. Try to focus on just a piece of what you want to do so you don't become overwhelmed and paralyzed by what you want to accomplish in the end. Take just one step at a time, and of course, enjoy the journey. Next slide, please. Before I begin, I want to dedicate this presentation to Selma Weintraub, past international president and archives chair for Women's League from the 1980s until 2006. Selma and her team spent hundreds of hours in the office organizing, sorting, labeling, and filing the archives, as well as labeling and putting photographs into albums with multiple indexes, almost 2,000 pictures. Women's League will continue to live forever, due in large part to her efforts. My humble thanks to you, Selma, and Selma's in the bottom left on the screen. Next slide. The journey we will discuss tonight is a fascinating and enjoyable one with lots of surprises, satisfaction, and fulfillment along the way. So let's begin. Our ambitious agenda includes what are archives, forming a committee, partnering with your congregation, archival materials, finding and collecting, organizing, programs and presentations, electronic records, and discussions about whether or not to donate. This presentation is just a beginning. It's a place to start. Or for those of you who are somewhere in the process, it may be a motivator and a refresher. Whichever the case, remember that this is a long-term project and that today's materials are tomorrow's archives. If it seems overwhelming, just start with one thing. Take baby steps. And I've said before, the only way we get from here to there is one step at a time. Next slide, please. I am so pleased to see so many of you who are interested in telling the story of your sisterhood through archiving. Why archives? Well, archives tell the story. They document people and identify and are valuable sources of information for research. They are our recorded memory and from an important part of our community, culture, and history. They can be a source of pride, awe, and understanding of who and what they are for future generations. They are how your sisterhood can live forever. People must know the past to understand the present and face the future. What are archives? The word archives has three meanings. One is simply the records, the documentary evidence of past events. Two is an organization dedicated to preserving the documentary heritage of a particular group. For example, one very well known, the National Archives and Records Administration in the United States. And three refers to the place where archival materials are kept, an archival repository itself. Next slide. What is archival material? Documents and objects that have intrinsic historic value. That's what archival material is. Materials that identify the kind of organization you are, what you did, What were the most important events, decisions, and things that marked a moment? They help tell your story. And you can see there examples of what archival in material consists of. Don't worry about writing it down. That list will be in your resource materials that you will get following this session. It's a long list and there's much more to it. Next slide. The first step in archiving is to form a committee. First, have the formation of an archives committee and the chair approved, because you have to do that depending on what your bylaws state. Gather a small group of women of all ages who agree on the importance of archival records and are willing to commit some time to the effort of collecting and preserving them, and are ready for an exciting and fun journey. Past presidents, members of long-standing, more recent members interested and enthused about archiving the history of your organization. It's always good to have a new, younger member's perspective. Committee members should be willing to learn, discover, and spend time on the project. They need to realize this is a long-term effort and that the initial work establishing the archives could take anywhere from 1 to 3 years, depending on the size of the collection and other variables. Once the initial phase is done, more records will be added over time. So though it may take long time, it's not going to be every day, all the time. It's not like a major intense project. It's something that you do as it's needed over time. The committee may need to obtain funding to pay for supplies, and if needed, obtain professional advice, and we'll talk about that later. Design a plan to find and collect records. Some items, as was already discussed before we started the presentation, may already be stored in a file or a closet or a shed behind the synagogue. Publicize. The entire congregation should be made aware of the project, and with a special appeal to longtime members to search out where they may have placed old records for safekeeping in their homes. Repeat the call for records because people can get busy and forget. Next slide. Some initial decisions are where to meet, how often, what to keep and not to keep, where archival materials will be stored, where donors can securely deposit materials, and possible partnering. So we need to decide whether to partner or not to partner. And of course, the best, the most obvious partner would be with the congregation. Certainly, your sisterhood's history is part of your congregation's history. Many sisterhoods and congregations create partnerships when they create their archives. Before you begin, consider doing that. Discuss the possibility with your committee and the sisterhood board. Meet with congregational leadership to ascertain their interest. Are there congregational archives? How would the partnership work? If yes, and approved, a sisterhood liaison should be on the congregation archive committee, or vice versa. Or, and I think this would be the best, a joint committee of both congregation and sisterhood leadership. Regardless, keep the congregation apprised of your activities in progress. And more specific information and considerations are in the resource materials. Next slide. The process. You need to arrange appropriate space, find and collect the material, decide what to keep, develop a catalog system, and we'll talk about that, process materials, and update things periodically. Do not store your archival materials in basements, attics, or garages. They should be secure, or sheds. They should be securely stored in an environment with stable temperature and humidity, and with the least risk of damage from leaks, flooding, pests, and mold. Some of you may know that in the 1980s, when Women's League had their office in a townhouse on 74th Street in Manhattan, a water main broke. The basement and part of the first floor was flooded. Most of their old documents and materials, which were stored in the basement, were destroyed. Next slide. Find and collect. Inventory what you already have. Items in the synagogue, where they are and what condition they are in, and other items that have been previously collected. Put out a request to your current and past members, previous members who may have moved away. Don't forget them. Families of active deceased members, staff, clergy, and former leadership. Women's League has gotten some wonderful materials from the families of women who are deceased, but were very active in Women's League, and they are very valued. Request potential donors search their basements, attics, closets, and seldom used rooms, since they may turn up a wealth of information and artifacts that are valuable and important. Scrapbooks may also contain great material. Remind donors to go through their printed photos and search their computers and phone for digital pictures and electronic documents. Donors should place materials in envelopes, folders, bags, or boxes labeled with their name and contact information. You need that information if questions arise and to acknowledge donors. Donors should understand that items they donate will probably not be returned to them. If there are items that they want returned, then they need to indicate that on the item or in the bag where the item is. Next slide, please. Here's a sample flyer that was created by Karen Bellina of the Women's League office that will be in your resource material, and it's a PDF that's fillable, so it's very easy for you to just use that, fill it in, and send it out to your membership. It's important to create flyers, email requests, posters. After the initial request period, you need to also send periodic reminders. The initial collection process should continue for about 3 months or longer, depending on their responses. Next slide. You need to decide what to keep. The process of sorting and arranging will likely involve decisions about whether to throw some items away. And we're all used to that with our own home items. Original letters should never be thrown out. If there is original handwriting, for instance, explanatory notes or in the margin or something on a document, save the copy with the handwritten notes. You only need to save one set of financial reports and minutes. Remove papers from binders and place in acid-free folders. Among the documents, there might be a letter or report that contains sensitive or potentially embarrassing information. Documents like this should not be thrown out or redacted. Members in the future will want an honest understanding of their organization's history, as this will allow them to be more honest with themselves about what they have become in their present circumstances. And I must tell you that one of the most interesting materials from my former synagogue in Harrisburg were the board minutes that spoke of the fights, really fisticuffs, in meetings in the early 1900s and having to call the paddy wagon. How wonderful to have such passion and know that it was there. Here's your rule of thumb. If you aren't sure what to keep and what to discard, ask yourself why the item is important to you. Does it tell who your organization was, how the members lived their lives? If it gives no insight into the life of your organization, it may be something to consider discarding. Next slide. The next step is to organize. First, some definitions. Records is used to refer broadly to the original documents. A collection is a completed set of boxed and folded documents. That's where we're hoping to go. The collection is divided into series. Each series consists of items that are related in content, definition, or theme. Examples of series titles might be education programs, fundraising, Tikkun Olam, Torah Fund. The inventory or finding aid is the guide or expanded inventory of the contents of the archival collection. Finding aids give a description of the items in the collection and where to locate them. The inventory or finding aid is the necessary link between creating the collection and making the contents of the collection usable, searchable, and accessible. If you can't find it, if you don't know what's there, it's not going to do any good for anybody. Next slide. Determine your categories or series. Some series may need to be divided into sub-series. As we sorted through the Women's League material, the series and sub-series kind of identify themselves. Each time, and you notice the smiles on these faces, we really did have fun doing this. Each time we got together to sort, we started making piles of materials that seemed to go together. We learned to label and sort the piles alphabetically so that they were easy to find. Some examples are adult education, creative handcrafts, conventions, and piles for each one, Sisterhood Shabbat, Tikkun Olam, outside organizations, branches and regions. The branches and regions, by the way, got their own room, and we sorted them by pile, a pile for each branch and region. Conservative movement, Torah Fund, board minutes, training sessions, you get the idea. Next slide, please. Here are some examples. And again, this list of examples will be in your resource materials. But it gives you a sense as to, if you think about the materials in your own sisterhood, you may want to sort them. Again, if you can't find the materials, they're not going to do any good to you or to anybody else. Next slide. Creating the inventory. As you process the materials, it would be very wise to start creating the inventory. With an inventory, the collection will be accessible to your members and researchers because they will know what is there and where. Creating the inventory now as you go through and organize the materials is a must and a big help. For the initial sorting, with the physical items and documents, I used a table format and asked each sorter to handwrite what they were sorting and fill in the information. And you can see examples of those on the slide. You may want to make piles of series and then divide those piles into sub-series before inventorying, one pile at a time. And I keep saying that do it a bit at a time, because you don't want to get overwhelmed, because overwhelm means you stop doing. Next slide, please. I then transferred the information to an Excel spreadsheet. I use Excel because it's easy to search words. Once the material is sorted by category, the documents in each series or sub-series will need to be arranged by some system of ordering that makes sense for a particular category of papers. For example, minutes are best sorted, obviously, by date. Speeches are best sorted alphabetically by the speaker's last name. Letters are best sorted by the last name of the letter writer, not the recipient. There is no firm rule about the system of sorting within a category. The committee can determine how best to arrange the folders. When we were ready to folder and box, I added the box and folder numbers. The slide is an example of the information recorded for each item. And you see that now. Next slide, please. When we worked with the printed pictures, we put them in separate piles by topic and then date within topics. As we sorted, we labeled them. Make sure the back of photographs are labeled with names, dates, and location and events. Only write in pencil unless you use an extra fine point Sharpie. Don't ever use a ballpoint pen because the ballpoint ink tends to bleed through to the front. And you can see there, that's the Archives Committee in 1999, and that's actually the back of that photo. The number on there is when we put it in albums, it's photo number 1984. So we're able to find that in a minute. In fact, I needed to find a picture and I did exactly that. I sent the number to the Women's League office and they were able to pull the album and find the number and scan it and send it to me. The pictures we thought were worth keeping but couldn't identify, we put in a separate pile to hopefully identify later by contacting people who might know more. Discard duplicates or near duplicates of photos and use the same rule of thumb as with documents when making those decisions. 25 pictures of a Purim spiel is just not necessary. Remember the rule of thumb. Ask these questions. Does it tell what your organization was? Demonstrate how the members lived their lives. Give insight into the life of your organization. If you find important photos in poor condition, there are many photos restorers. It does cost money to do that, but at least you can have that done for the most important photos. Next slide. First, for your photo inventory, use an Excel spreadsheet once again and add each photograph. The best way to organize printed photos was done by Selma Weintraub. She did an incredible job organizing the photos into albums. She created 3 separate indices by person, by number, and by subject. Unfortunately, although they were originally done on a computer, they were only available now in printed form, so they are not so searchable. Creating an inventory using Excel allows you to search words and sort, so only one index may be necessary. And you can see that if you've got it, you can just word search Rossman and find all the photos that Sid Rossman, a past international president, is in. If you scan photos, include the digital photos in your inventory. So you see there's not only the album number, but for those digital photos, it shows under what location. So to label your digital photos, include the information in the file name of the photo. For example, convention/1982/installation, Selma Weintraub and Goldie Queller. Save the photo as either a TIFF, TIF, or JPEG, JPG file. Photo albums can be used to store photos as opposed to folders and boxes. Make sure the album you purchase adheres to archival standards. You don't want all your efforts to be for naught due to deterioration over time. Some organizations digitize all their photos. If you keep them easily accessible, that may not be necessary since they can be digitized as you need them in that format. At this time, Women's League's photo albums are kept in the office. We have not given them to JTS because I want to use them more and have not been digitized, just a few of them. If you digitize your photos, make sure they are backed up, as with all digital material, in 3 places. And an example is the Bethel Sisterhood Archives inventory for photographs. Next slide. Documents should be placed in acid-free folders and filed in acid-free cardboard boxes. And you see those in the picture with Cheryl Pat. They should be stored on shelves off the floor in a cool room, which is 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, safe from moisture and humidity. If you can't do the perfect location for them, do as best as you can. So you need to get certain supplies. Acid-free boxes and folders are two of the most important supplies you can get. Avoid plastic and PVC. When it comes to supplies like photo and document sleeves, look for ones made of polyester, polypropylene, or polyethylene. Make sure you have pencils and at least one extra fine point Sharpie. Some companies that specialize in archive materials are Hollinger Metal Edged and Gaylord Archival. Supplies you should avoid are pens, glue, tape, metal staples and paper clips, which rust, and rubber bands, which dry and break. Next slide. Once you have organized and folded your documents, you're ready to label and box the folders in keeping. Next slide, please. Thank you. Box the folders in keeping with the inventory finding aid you are developing. Remember, the inventory is the necessary link between the collection and making the contents of the collection searchable and accessible. The labeling of each folder is best done on the tab of the folder. And obviously you don't need to type it, but I've done that just for the slide here. You can write in pencil because change happens. Folder labeling should include several pieces of information. Arrange something like what you see there. Top left, name of the collection. Top right, folder number and box number. And the top middle, series number and name and contents of the folder. Then you want to number your series titles alphabetically. By contrast, the ordering of folders within a series and subseries may be arranged either by alphabet or date or some other scheme that works for the contents of that series. The numbering of the folders in each box starts with number 1 and continues to the end of the box, whether or not the new series starts midway in the box. Each box should be labeled with the name of the organization and the box number. And you see to the right is a weird kind of a, bottom right is a weird sized box. They have archival boxes for all kinds of contents. And you may need, if you want, to get the archival box that fits the banners or some of the other items. As you box items, use the Excel spreadsheet you have created as your inventory and fill in the box and folder numbers. The inventory should be posted on the organization's website, and it should be publicized as widely as possible. You want to let folks know about the collection and what it contains. Ideally, it will attract members as well as outside researchers, and it will provide the basis for further research on the history of your organization. This is the point where I took the organization of the Women's League Archives. When you get to this point, make sure you pat yourself on the back and spend time and energy publicizing the fabulous work you have done. Create programs and publicity highlighting your archives and the treasures you have found, as well as urge your members and researchers to use and enjoy the materials. Next slide. So what kind of programs and presentations should you do to just do that? Well, other than use the information to tell your story, let's use it, for instance, at an honoree event. Lots of times you're honoring somebody, you don't know what they've done or you want more specifics. Do a tour of your archives, highlighting interesting items and treasures that you have found. Do a treasure hunt. What do you have in your home that is connected to Sisterhood? And it would be fun to have the members bring those in or do them on Zoom. Do a leader's legacy. Focus on past leaders and their impact on your sisterhood. We just celebrated Sukkot. For next year, create Sukkot Ushpizot. Invite sisterhood leaders into your sukkah by creating small posters and pictures and a brief history of their impact on your sisterhood. Do oral history interviews. Do a program, I Remember When. Could be very interesting. Also, could it happen today? Identify an event from the past, and how would it look like today? Do a program or article or whatever on lessons learned from the past that resonate for today. And these are just a few things to stimulate your creativity. And write and publish your story. And hopefully we'll be doing another Zoom seminar in February to help you to give some guidelines to writing your story. Use your creativity and your archives to make current members feel a part of your sisterhood, a part of your family, its story and its impact on the future. Have them buy into the future of sisterhood. Next slide. And as you go forward, next slide, please. Thank you. As you go forward, keep your archives current. Today's materials become tomorrow's archives. Identify an appropriate time period for updating activity. It can be following a major event, at the end of an administration, yearly. Use whatever will work for your organization. To make future identification easier, make sure all items, publicity, photographs, flyers, programs, are all dated. Identify the people in the photograph as it is taken and write it on the back or use it for digital photos in the file name. So here's a big challenge, and I was just talking about it with Rabbi Wollensfields today, and that is electronic records. Archivists refer to the time since the beginning of the 21st century as the Dark Ages, due to the fact that since that time, so much of our records have been generated by computers and not printed. Therefore, there is much less physical archival material to collect and process. Some of these electronic records you may want to keep as part of your archives. To collect the electronic record materials, you can use some of the same techniques presented when talking about collection. Use the same criteria for retention and cataloging the collection. You may want to use Google Drive or Dropbox or similar storage space for these materials. It would also be wise to have 3 different backups. You don't want to lose what you have worked so hard to collect and organize. Some suggestions for labeling electronic documents are on the resource sheet. Of course, the challenge with electronic materials is that, most importantly, you will need to create a plan for their preservation. The plan for electronic records must take into account the changes in hardware and software, the limitations of storage media, and the potential value of your information. This is where you will probably need that technical support and advice. Most importantly, there needs to be a commitment to a plan to continue to make these records accessible over time. And here are 3 options. Print any electronic records you want to include in your archives. Print them all and organize and label them in the same way as your other physical materials. Or obtain technical support to create and implement a digital preservation plan. Or donate your archives to an archival repository that is committed and capable of preserving not only your physical archives, but your electronic ones as well. Women's League, as Debbie told you, decided to donate our archives to an archival repository, in our case, the JTS library. That is certainly an option for congregations and sisterhoods. They definitely have archives from congregations and sisterhoods. A repository can provide long-term preservation of your materials. Due to their systems being online, it will also make your records more findable and accessible, and therefore your work will be used more frequently. To find a repository, you may want to contact a repository in your area, the state or local historical society, state archives, the Society of American Archivists, the Jewish Theological Seminary, or the American Jewish Historical Society. And I have that list on that resource material. I know I've given you lots of information, and you will find more information and details and resources on the tips and resources sheet for this program that you will be sent after the program. Next slide. There is a Chinese proverb, an old one, that says the palest ink is better than the best memory. If it's not written down, you'll not remember it. When you create your archives, ink and memory work hand in hand. As a novelist Amy Tan once wrote, memory fades, is selective, and fails us. But what is written in your archives will last forever. Next slide, please. For those of you who registered and or attended this session, we will send you the Creating Your Archives, as I've said before, tips and resources handout with useful information and links to some helpful articles. The recording of tonight's presentation, plus the 6 other How to Live Forever sessions and the resource materials may now be found on the Women's League website. Just put in the search bar, How to Live Forever. Please keep in touch and let us know what and how you are doing and how we can help. And I would be happy to come by Zoom to your sisterhoods to work with you as you start with your archiving or continue with it. I hope tonight's program has motivated and enthused you to start creating your sisterhood archives. It is an incredible journey and a priceless gift to your members, the community, and the future generations. The gift of better knowing who they are because they understand where they come from and use the lessons from the past to strengthen the present and future. So go and do and enjoy. The chat box will now be opened and Janet Kirshner will look for your questions and suggestions. Please unmute if you want to ask the questions directly. So, chat's open. Anybody have a question that they'd like to ask as we're waiting for the chat? And I think we can go on gallery view. That would be great, thank you. Go ahead, Lori.
When you showed the folder of Bethel Sisterhood, it didn't say what city, what state. Should every folder be labeled with city and state so that if it gets taken from the box, you know?
Yeah, well, yes, it should all be labeled together, and that would be a great idea. And if you're going to be doing this and a lot, then you might want to even get a rubber stamp with, Bethel Sisterhood Archives, Cranford, New Jersey, or wherever. So that's a great idea. Thank you. Janet, any other?
I don't see any chats right now.
Okay, everybody's ready? Everybody knows what they're doing? No questions?
Marlene has her hand up. Marlene
Okay,
had a question.
Marlene, it's lovely to see you. You're just down
She's
the street.
muted though.
Yeah, I just unmuted. I would suggest that if each box has a number, that all the file folders put in that box should have that box number on them so you'll know where to put them back if you pull them out.
And that's exactly what the folder tab showed. You have the file number and the box number at the top of the file folder, usually on the right. What do you think? Linda, why are you here?
Which Linda?
That's fine, Linda. And then we
Miss
can,
Linda?
yeah, Linda Bogroff.
Well, we're dealing with these issues, you know, of who has what, where are things, how do we store them digitally or, you know, physically. And we also have in Gainesville in a year and a half, we're going to start our 100th year anniversary of Congregation B'nai Israel. So we've been thinking about what can Sisterhood contribute to this. We're going to have all kinds of different activities going on and things like that. So a history of Sisterhood, it seems to me, would be a great way of contributing to the 100th year celebration of our congregation. So this is just perfect for us to be thinking about now.
Super, super. And
Oh,
thank you for
appreciate it.
bringing the history up. One of the things, we do have a date set for another session. I'm not going to say last because I said last the last time. Another session on writing your history, writing your story. If we have people who are interested. So if you want to email me, and then you can certainly let me know if you're interested in doing a session on writing the history, writing the story of your sisterhood. And if there's enough people interested, we will certainly do that. I want you to know I had a conversation this morning with the president of my sisterhood, who had told me that she had, for the 50th anniversary of our congregation, they did interviews with longstanding members, some of whom were at the time were still alive and still willing to and able to be interviewed. And they did a video, they hired a videographer and they did a videotape of it instead of a journal, whatever. And she's the only one who has a copy of that tape. And so we had a whole discussion on what to do with that tape. My suggestion is whenever you have those, they're very precious. The first thing you want to do is you want to have them transcribed. And there is a company that's not too expensive that I use. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of them. I think it's rev.com. And they're very good, and you can have those transcribed. The other thing I want to say is there's some frustration and depression in some communities, sisterhoods, congregations, and families, because the people who you want to find out your history from are no longer around. And so lots of families and organizations give up. They say, well, they're not there and we can't do the history. But what I encourage you to do is to remember that you are tomorrow's history. And wherever you can start. If you can't go back 100, and my congregation in Harrisburg will be celebrating their 140th birthday next year. And if you can't go back 140 years, then go back as far as you can and start from there. Don't let it depress you so that it paralyzes you from doing more. Janet, nothing else? Debbie?
So, Corey, I have a public service announcement.
Sure.
For those of you that begin to go through your archives, we were on a meeting yesterday and today where we talked about the fact that many of your past sisterhood presidents, your branch presidents, your region presidents have boxes in the garage, boxes in the second bedroom, boxes in the basement, boxes in the attic. As they go through those boxes to look for your archives, we're actually looking for the Torah Fund Tzedakah boxes. There's a great need for those, and they haven't been recreated in many years. We've run out of them. So as you are all going through your archives, if you come up with Torah Fund Tzedakah boxes that are folded flat, extras, or ones that are actually formed with tape and they're full and you have them, we'd love to have those boxes. So let us know as you go through your archives if you have them. put them in a big envelope, mail them to us, send them COD, send them to somebody who's coming to New York, but there is a great need for those. So if you go through your things looking for your archives and you come up with Torah Tzedakah boxes, we need them.
Okay,
Debbie, I think I have some of those in that closet I was talking about.
good.
Excellent, Joan.
And hopefully they're not moldy.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think I
Great.
can get my hands on those for you.
So you and I can talk about how we're going to get them, but we
Okay.
need them. Thank you, Joan.
I'm pretty sure I have some.
You know, everybody has everything in those boxes. And yesterday when we talked about the past sisterhood presidents and the branch presidents and the region presidents, everybody said, oh yeah, there's a box in the garage, there's a box in the attic. And I think that those are the boxes that you actually want to go through. You will find archives in them. And I'm sure many of your past leadership will be very grateful that you've gotten rid of their boxes for them. So.
So one of the things that it's really important to do is once you find materials to build excitement about what you're finding is to publicize those materials. I don't know how many of you remembered when I found the 1918 address that Matilda Schechter gave shortly after Women's League was formed, and Debbie used it in one of the Shabbat messages. It's incredible, and it's not only is it incredible, but it's something that's as relevant today as it was over 100 years ago. I found pictures of, I just found very interesting. I found a history with Lois Silverman's help, a history of the building on 74th Street. Women's League, before we were in the Interchurch Center and before we were in the office that we are now, we purchased in 1969 a townhouse from the Jewish Braille Institute. And those were our offices till 2000, about 2000. I can't remember the exact year, but I have it. And that was a fascinating article on the history, the architectural history of that building. That is now on the website within that archives button. Very soon I have one more piece to put up there, and then I will do some publicity on the whole archival material that we've had up there, but you guys can do it. You can really have fun with it. There's some really interesting stuff. How many of you remember Women's League, what it is, what it does, that little brochure that we used to put in all those conference kits? You guys are too young, right? We used to do, Marlene, you remember Women's League, what it is, what it does?
Yes, I have.
It was a
some.
little tri-folio brochure that had a listing of all women's. Well, the first Women's League, what it is, what it does, is on the website. That first piece. And it's fascinating.
Hi, Mary.
It's really fascinating.
I have a question, Corey.
Sure.
You mentioned that you had spreadsheets that were only paper spreadsheets, and that they weren't digital.
Right.
Okay. Is there any way that you're going to be making it a digital? Because it can be done digitally.
Well, I have them digitized, but I can't search them as a PDF.
It would just have to be it would have to be reformatted, be redone, much like what the resolutions were done, because I was part of that effort of digitizing the resolutions and then typing them up. Well, not really, but making them a Word document.
Oh, Sheila, let's talk offline. That would be great.
That.
Yeah, let's talk offline. That would be great.
Okay.
Comments? How many of you are into archives, have been doing archives for your organization at all? Lori, what have you been doing? And Marjorie and
Well, at B'nai Yeshurun in Cleveland, we've been going through, we've been archiving Sisterhood. And we've been doing the archives of, going through all the scrapbooks, all the pictures, and really trying to identify people in the pictures and weed out duplicates, making sure we can tell the stories, and just really organizing, and then periodically spending money to get the archival equipment to store.
Mhm. Good.
And we haven't found a place yet in Cleveland to take the archives.
You might want to contact, contact your state, contact the American Jewish Historical Society.
Right, in Cincinnati, they would take it, but the synagogue is reluctant to let it go that far.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're
I got
dealing with
that.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other questions or comments? I saw some other of you are doing archiving. No
Now,
question.
how come archiving, this is Lori Davis again, how come it isn't like family history where you start at the present and work back?
You don't have to do that. I mean, I've not started at the present and worked back. What you want to do with archiving, with history, is you want to go from wherever you can and then put it in some kind of, usually it's in some kind of a chronological order.
Okay.
And if we do a session on writing your history, you can do it chronologically. You can do it by subject, very much like you have an option, whatever works best for your sister, for your congregation. There was a journal that somebody was showing me that was done for a 50th anniversary of their sisterhood, and they didn't do it chronologically, they did it by subject, by Torah fund, by education, by fundraising, by social committee, whatever. So, and that was what worked for them. They also used it as a major fundraiser because they had sponsors, and they listed names in the back, and they made some good money with it, but they had the history there as well.
So I just wanted to say, I think that's a good point. And it's not just materials and flyers. It could be music. It could be anything that's part of the history of that sisterhood. I was in Des Moines recently to visit with a sisterhood that was celebrating their 100th anniversary. And after the event, they brought me into this long hallway with a 5-drawer file cabinet and said, this is filled with music that their region music person had created, plays, skits, operettas, everything. And they had come to the national convention at the Concord, and there were 5 drawers of music. It was just music. And so that's part of their archives. And by the way, Corey, they sent me a package and I have it for you. I will give it to you. But it's not just the flyers and the pictures, it's everything that's part of that sisterhood. So
I was going to say my sisterhood's 142 years old, and Debbie came to our.
I came to celebrate with you. Yes, I did. Yep.
What sisterhood, Sheila? Tell everybody.
It's Miriam's Sisterhood of Oheb Shalom Congregation. So our congregation's 162 years old. We're exactly 20 years younger.
In South Orange, New Jersey.
South Orange, New Jersey. We are, as far as the synagogue, we are co-founders of USCJ, and as far as Women's League, we're co-founders of Women's League. So anyway, our archives are, I would say, probably until maybe 1960, maybe even later, is at the Jewish Federation, the JCC of Metro West, which is in Whippany. And actually, we have our song, our Miriam song, that was archived there. So we have everything from photographs to booklets to everything they archived. But unfortunately, we got to do it now. And I think once I'm done with my presidency, I'll probably work on that part. But the group is kind of small right now. But we have a lot of stuff, a lot of things, and it's great to look back at on everything.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned saving your minutes, anything handwritten. We have our first minutes that were written in German, and
Wow.
they were translated. So it was, and that night, at our 140th anniversary, it was a Havdalah night, and so we had our a reenactment of how we became and accepted of being Miriam Sisterhood, but it was a different name back then. It was a German name, and it progressed during the years. But
That's fabulous.
But we didn't.
Nice. Elizabeth?
If you're just starting out, what's the ideal number of people you would recruit, or is there a maximum that you think that? Why are you laughing? Yes, talk about that.
Yeah, I think you can recruit as many as you want. If you have, let's say, in the perfect world, you have 55 people who want to involve in, this is a perfect world, right? Who want to get involved with helping you organize and categorize and the archives and write the story and so on and so forth. What you do with a large group like that is you have a core of maybe 3 or 4 people, or maybe even 5, who become your core committee. And then they work much like a sisterhood. It's like an executive committee, and they each take on a responsibility, or they work with a certain number of people. So you can have as many as you want. But you want to find out what their passions are. Why are they interested in archiving? What is it? Do they want to write the story? Do they want to see the photographs? I mean, everybody has favorite things that they like to do. And so, I mean, I've had a lot of interest in the creative handcrafts that Women's League has done over the years, which we now have pictures on the website of those handcrafts. Yeah.
I was also wondering, I happen to have a little more time tonight. Could you give us a tour of the website? It's more fun to have someone pointing things out.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. If I can be made a co-host, I can.
You are.
I am a co-host. So let's do that. I want to make sure that we answer anybody's questions before I do that, because I don't want to. Yeah, Esther.
I just wanted to mention something. Is we haven't really started archiving our brochures, anything, paper, but what we did just resurrect is our embroidered Sisterhood tablecloth that we've had for years, and it was hand embroidered with people's simchas and memorials and well wishes, and we've just brought it out again, and we are using it as a fundraiser. So we're bringing it midor door from one generation to the next, and people from our generation can now add their family names to it.
Super, super. I encourage you to take pictures of sections of it as you go, and identify maybe the people on it, just so those, the website is a wonderful, the internet is a wonderful way to publicize what you're doing and have interest in it. There's nothing there. It's so happy for a person whose grandmother was a founding member of your sisterhood, to see her name or her picture on your website. And not to be crass, but if you do, some kind of a tribute journal to your archives or to something like that, they're more than happy for whatever they would like to sponsor something, to sponsor a name or whatever. So you want to look at this as a total program. But if you don't tell anybody, then nobody's going to know. So think about that. One of the other things that I just learned about, I think it was yesterday, that there was a sisterhood that had a tablecloth, I think it was, and they ended up, it was not too large, but they ended up making it into a chuppah. They used it as a chuppah in their congregation, which I thought was really a lovely, lovely thing to do. And so that is their congregation's new chuppah for those who want it. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Other questions or comments? So would you, I can take you to the archives website if you'd like, and show you if there aren't any comments. I'm going to be sending you a, as I said, after the session, in the next couple of days, I'll be sending you a survey. And I want to know what you thought of the session, but even more, I want to find out if you'd really like to have a writing your story session. We'll be sending you those resources. But
Corey, Marjorie's hand is up, and I'm
Okay.
going to say good night because I've been on Zoom since 8 o'clock this morning. And thank you, everybody. And thank you, Corey, for leading a great session. And I hope to see all of you in all of the other wonderful programs that we do.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Deb. It's been a pleasure. Okay, Margie, I'm sorry, Marjorie.
That's okay. My question was, you said you're going to send out the presentation slides.
Mm-mm.
Well-
No, resources, but I can send the slides, but
Well, okay, you said you're going to send resources. Will you also send us the slides and a copy of the recording when available?
the recording will be on the website.
Okay.
Recording
And
will
the
be on.
slides won't be on the website, or?
I don't typically put them on. If you want them, you can just email me and I'll send them to you.
Okey doke.
It
Okay.
should be in the video, in the recording.
Yeah, the slides will be on the recording.
Yeah.
They'll be part of the recording. Other questions or comments? Laura-
Corey, you seem to only speak of like paper documents, but what about things that aren't paper? Like frames and awards and statues, whatever.
They're part of your archives, and I didn't treat them, but just to say that you got to buy the boxes to hold them. One of the things that's really lovely is to have a display case in your synagogue if you have the room for it, and have the archives committee put in items just like in a museum, and you can change them out if you have the room for them. But if not, if even so, the ones that you want to store, again, it's in archival boxes, textiles and archival boxes, because you don't want them to be ruined. But I've taken pictures of the textiles that Women's League has. Any other, before we go, Isabel Luxa is part of our communications department at Women's League, and you see her, she's behind that Women's League logo, and I just want to thank Isabel so much for, there you go, for being with us and helping us tonight.
You're
Thank you so
welcome
much.
for having me.
She's a delight, and every time I say, Isabel, can we put this on the website? She said, sure. So any other questions? If not, for those of you who want to stay, I can do a little tour of the archives section of the website.
Thank you.
Okay.
Will that be recorded as well, Corey?
It could be.
You're
could
still
be.
recording, that's why.
Yeah, we're still recording so that we can do that. All right, I'm going to share my screen and
Bring up the website first, so it's there when you share your screen.
Okay, hold on. I will do that. Well, I'm gonna do this. Okay. All right, thank you for that. And I'm gonna go back to Zoom. And now here's the website. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can you see that now?
It's
No.
coming. There you go.
Okay, so I have to move you to, well,
Do people know that they can slide the gallery out of the
yeah,
way?
you see, I just slid it. Oh, I don't know if you can see this or not. So here's the archives button. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have to log in because we want everybody who wants to learn about Women's League to be able to learn about Women's League and its history. So it's right there before you log in. And you click on the archives, and here there's just a description of the archives department. Okay. And let's go back. Here's that timeline. And you can move it. Oh, wait a minute. It's okay. And what's really cool about it is you have for the year the world events and Women's League events for the year. It's hard, and in order, if you want to see the whole thing pretty easily, this is the pretty one. This is the spreadsheet as a PDF. So you see here 1918 world events, National Women's League was founded. Of course, that's a world event. Matilda Schechter was the first president. Germany and allies signed the armistice, so on and so forth. And I think it's, if you want to get the easier without the pretty thing, here's your there it is. So then we have articles, interviews, and documents. And these are all PDFs. This is that speech I was talking about, A Task for Jewish Women by Matilda Schechter. No, well, there's two of them. I forget which one it was. It may have been this one in May. The very first committee meeting minutes of Women's League, 12th annual report, and these are listed by date. This is the actual act, the State of New York Act 159, creating Women's League. Here's the Women's League, what it is, what it does. And look at that. Is that amazing? And these were, can you imagine how expensive that was to print? Each of these was a page, right? So you can see what Women's League was all about. I just think it's fascinating.
That's really a treasure.
It is a treasure. We have the actual
is.
one, but I've scanned or taken pictures or whatever. This is a really interesting a chat about Women's League by Sarah Cussey, and she's got quite a few things, which was done in the mid to late 40s. This is that article on Women's League's home, 48 East 74th Street. 1969 to 2001 is when Women's League owned this building. And it's not, they don't even mention Women's League, but I just thought for so many people who have enjoyed that, they would find it interesting. The life of Matilda Ross Schechter, IRS status as a religious organization in 2015. These were articles that Lisa Kogan, our previous education director, wrote, which are very fascinating. And this is, we did a history interview with Bernice Balter, who was the executive director from Women's League of Women's League from 1986 to 2007, and first started working at Women's League in 1978. We did a video interview with her, and then we had it transcribed, which as I had mentioned before, I would suggest. This is an article that was written in 2022 about Women's League. Then we have, creative handcrafts. And those of you who are creative handcrafters would love this. This is the 60th anniversary tapestry. that we have, and we will probably hang in someplace in the office after we put it together, because it was taken apart. I took it apart. This is President Ruth Perry accepting the needlepoint. We used to have, and it's described in there, we used to have branches and then regions each do a particular project for years for conventions. This is the note card that was made. This is the placement, the region, the branches, where they are, what they are, you know, who did it. And so we're going to hopefully put that up. I think it's pretty cool. Journey through Jewish, I mean, here in Nesak Kodesh banners. You'll find it interesting. This is the brochure that was used, and then here are the actual, hold on, here are the actual banners. We don't have all of them. Okay, so this is the carpeting in the old office where we just moved from, because that was the only way to do it. And I wanted to take the pictures. We have the chuppah project, not pictures of the chuppah, but the booklet, the Torah Fund Pin project, where we did the Torah Fund Pin designs in needlepoint in 1998, Mitzvot Letter Torah project, Torah Letter project, and the Eshet Chaya quilt in 2006. So you can enjoy those. And if we find any others, we'll be really happy about that. We have historical publications, the 3 history books that were written, the first 50 years, They Dared to Dream, 68 to 78, the 6th decade, and 75 years of vision and volunteerism. And we haven't written anything since 1992. So it's really time to, I think, to do something. We have a section on the international presidents, and this is pictures of them. This Garland of Grace is a video we did in 2017 in honor of the 100th anniversary, and it's really fabulous. And then it's also been transcribed. Each president was interviewed for about 45 minutes, and we had the full videos of each president sent to their families. Many of whom are no longer living. Regions and branches are the listings of, we did regional histories, but it's not of it's of the regions, the Jewish history of where these branches were or are, the region branch presidents, and then region branch histories is something that we're hoping to have the regions do and do histories of those. That's not there yet. Special projects, Jewels of the Crown Awards, Masorti Women International and Women's League, Masorti Women's Study Days, Mitzvot Torah, Simchat Megillat Esther, Women's League Institutes, and World Affairs. So there are some pictures there here. For those that many of you may not even know about Mitzvot Torah. It was a long time ago. This is where Women's League, the story of it, where Janet Tobin as president led the charge to have Women's League write its own Torah. And I encourage you to read about the story for those of you who don't know it. And the Torah now resides in the Women's League Seminary Synagogue, and we take it with us when we go to conventions and stuff, because it's our Torah, but it's used all year round. And Torah Fund. Here is, again, a Torah Fund timeline. This is a Torah Fund scholarship fund brochure, 1948, before we even really were, this was not Torah Fund, this was the Torah Fund Scholarship Fund. But you can see this brochure. and it's fascinating to read. Matilda Schechter Residence Hall groundbreaking and dedication. There are the ladies with their hats. Louis Finkelstein, who was at the time the chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, and 2 Women's League presidents. This is the publicity that was on this was the groundbreaking. The first picture was the groundbreaking. This was when the dedication. And of course, University of Judaism residence halls in 1989. This was the dedication of the residence hall. And this is a picture of the residence hall. And then the last piece is not there yet. We haven't done it yet. It's a listing of Women's League publications and some descriptions of them. So that's the archives section of the website. And if you take some time and you look at it, and Isabel, thank you, you're still on, you will really enjoy. There's some real gems there. And we will put stuff up as we find it. So questions?
Thank you very much. No, thank you. It's motivating. You know, I'm like a little girl. If you show me something, I'm likely to go back and really read it.
So if you look at the Women's League historical publications, the 3 of them that we did, they're though 75 years of vision and volunteerism is really, much of it is done in sections by president, but not all of it. So you can do it by administration, or you can do it by topic. And I think the first one, They Dared to Dream, was done a little bit of both. So if you're looking to write your story. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Corey, very much. This
Well,
was
Yeah, thank you,
very
Corey.
enjoyable.
You're very welcome.
Very informative.
Good. Go and do, as they say. Go and do. And you have my information, and I will send it to you when I send you the survey and the materials. Please keep in touch, and if you want me to come, I'm happy to do that and work with your sisterhood individually. I can do that. Okay. I'm just a volunteer. I'm not a professional archivist. I've done most of my research on the internet and through actual doing. And it's been a fascinating journey, and I encourage you to do it. Marjorie.
Corey, you asked us to email you if we would be interested in the next session. I already did that.
Okay.
You also asked us to email you about something else, and I don't remember what that was. I'm sorry.
If you really want the PowerPoint slides, I will send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everybody have a good evening, and it's been a pleasure.